Hi, welcome to the Civboot podcast. My name is Rhett Berg. This is the Civboot podcast, which stands for Civilizational Bootstrapper. So maybe the first thing you're asking, I'm sure the first thing you're asking is, what is a Civboot? Well, a Civboot is a civilizational bootstrapper. A bootstrapper is something that can be used to start itself or rebuild itself. And what does it mean to be civilizational? It means it can restart civilization in terms of rebuilding the tools and technology that civilization needs to exist. Modern civilization, that is. Things like computers, metals, robots, plastics, farming equipment, things of that nature. Different levels of Civboot. So levels 1 could rebuild itself, could rebuild like computers and such. Level 2 can build the energy needed, energy producing and storage technologies, reusable energy generation and storage. A level 3 could produce the food needed, so an automated food production facility, and a level 4 could be like people could live underground or on Mars, completely recycling things. So that's the basic vision. It is a set of tools and technology that can reproduce itself fully. This should be thought of as a goal, not as something that's going to be accomplished easily or soon. In fact, it would require basically a global effort of many, probably thousands of people to build the first level 1 Civboot. It should be pointed out, the level 0 Civboot already exists. It's the entire world can currently produce the tools, technology, computers, etc. that civilization needs to exist. So it's definitely physically possible to produce a Civboot. The question is, essentially, that a Civboot is asking is, can these tools, technology, processes, etc. be made open so that anyone can produce it, so that a third world or second world country could have it, produce it for free. So can the tools be made open, and can they be made simple so that a small group of people, maybe 400 people focusing just on this, could manage to reproduce it and learn the tools and technology, maybe more? What is the minimum number of people over a time frame of, say, 5 years that would be needed? And what is the minimum space and resource requirements? So how many warehouses would it be? Would it be the size of a small village? Would it be the size of a city? How big would you need to be able to build a Civboot? That's the fundamental question. Can this be made simple? And can it be made in a reduced fashion so that it could actually be reproduced in multiple places? So what are the benefits of a Civboot? Why would anyone want to do this? Why would anyone want to simplify and reduce technology to core open principles that can be easily reproduced to build a new one? Well, there are several reasons. The first one may jump at you automatically, which is simplicity, education. And that's probably one of the core reasons, actually. Simplifying the technology stack, allowing for technologies to be built on a simpler technology stack where every layer is understood, enables both potentially more efficient and simpler technologies, but also enables people to learn that technology stack. From my personal experience, I'm a software engineer. I have degrees in electrical engineering and physics. And I look at the technology stack and I see extreme complexity, difficulty understanding each layer. Every layer is extremely complicated. The hardware layers are built on silicon purification and wafer processing facilities that cost $20 billion or more. A lot of the processes are proprietary in terms of how this stuff is produced. Nobody knows, no small group of people know how to do this. That seems like a problem to me. Going up the stack, there are good open source hardware architectures like the RISC-V, but I don't, to my knowledge, there's no completely open source hardware laptop, for instance, being composed of just open technologies that anybody could freely replicate. And going up to software, things get better, but Linux is kind of the primary operating system, and it's quite complex. 20 million lines of code or more, all written in C. It has a lot of advantages, and there are good build systems that can build from scratch, NixOS, but I think the whole process could be simplified significantly. It'd be very difficult for a small group of people to be able to understand it enough to improve upon it when having to focus on all the other pieces. When you get into machining, manufacturing, things like that, things are maybe slightly better, but still, there's challenges. There's more technology that's needed. There's a initiative, I don't know where I haven't heard about it in a while, but it's called Open Source Ecology, trying to build the village tool set, things like engines, farming equipment, construction equipment, 3D printer, that kind of thing. That is kind of a tangential, similar effort. A Civboot is more encompassing. It's not just building those tools, which are necessary. 3D printers, farming equipment, construction equipment are very necessary to be able to replicate a Civboot, but also be able to produce the computers, which is outside the scope of open source ecology on purpose. So yeah, that's the educational reason is one of the main ones. There's more of a philosophical reason too, which is civilization depends on these technologies, computers, robotics, fabrication of tools, and etc. And because civilization depends on these things, it is right for civilization to own these things. Obviously, individuals could own better, make improvements, have better efficiencies, sell their inventions. And this is not an argument of capitalism versus socialism or communism or anything like that. It's not a philosophical argument. It's just an argument that civilization owning the core fundamentals of what built it up will make a better civilization. And then there's also quite arguments for the complexity of the supply chain, the fragility of the supply chain. If one country went down, much of the silicon is produced in only a few countries, for instance. So if they went offline, we might be unable to replicate what we need in order to maintain civilization in this country or another country. The United States is probably less susceptible to this than many other countries, but countries should be able to build what they need to survive. Also a philosophical argument, but I think an important one. So those are some of the reasons why people might want a Civboot. Now, is this really possible? That is the question. As I mentioned before, yes, it's possible. We already have a level 0 Civboot. It's physically possible. The physics of it are not the problem. The question is the engineering of it and the creating an openness for the technologies, removing the proprietariness of these technologies. And that is a major effort, to be sure. As I mentioned, one of the biggest problems is probably the semiconductor. Building computer chips is quite an involved process. Currently, it involves $1 billion, $20 billion silicon manufacturing plants and wafer processing plants. Can those costs be reduced, or is there a new technology that can? Is there a new technology that can provide a simpler means? So there's some technologies indicating there might be printed circuit boards. Printed meaning using an inkjet printer. Might be possible using nanoparticle ink, and other technologies involving small magnet, like nanoscale magnets that might be producible outside of extreme purity silicon manufacturing. But these are research projects. the I think the fundamental point is that will be the most difficult piece. Is will a Civboot, will a small production facility, small being relative, smaller than the Earth, be able to produce computer chips? Will be the fundamental question. And actually, I'm going to spend a whole podcast on that soon. So I think the point should be clear. I cannot do this myself. I had a vision that the goal of a Civboot is important, because even if the goal is not achievable, every change of simplifying our technology stack will help our technology stack be more robust, our world be more robust, and our civilization to be better. If it is achievable, if a civilizational bootstrapper is achievable, then it could mean economic prosperity for any part of the globe, any group of people who can build the tools and technology and can learn to build the tools and technology could value from it. I think a lot of these tools and technology need to be made more open. So, yeah, as I already mentioned, future episodes will be, the first one hopefully will be focused on new technologies coming in the, new research technologies in how to build computer chips, and also exploring the possibility of reducing the complexity and cost of silicon. Because a Civboot computer doesn't need to be, our high frequency computer chips. It could be lots of parallel low frequency computer chips, for instance. So it's not necessarily that we need to match modern computer chips. I'll explore how computer chips have evolved over time. I aim for this podcast to be educational in nature, not just about a Civboot per se, but about all of the layers of a technology stack and what would be needed to understand them and rebuild them. And I hope to have people who are interested in this, not just a Civboot, but any of these different layers that could contribute towards a Civboot. Please contact me. Actually, what's a good way? The good way to contact me is to go to civboot.org, specifically the GitHub link, and post an issue that you wish to be contacted. And I would love to have a discussion about the topics that you want to talk about. I hope to create a community with this podcast, a community of people who are interested in simplifying the technology stack and making these technologies more accessible, more learnable, and more open. So thank you for listening, and I look forward to having future podcasts.